One of the things I like to do is find these historical markers that are planted all over Michigan and see what they have to say. I kind of enjoy doing that. And this is dedicated to the battles of the River Raisin, describing the Americans' victory of January 18th, 1813. Captain John McCullough of the 5th Kentucky wrote, "I have seen the enemy, and I have seen him defeated. I have seen my fellow soldiers extended lifeless, bloody corpses on the ground, and many others groaning in agony from dangerous wounds. I've heard the balls whistling as thick as the pattering hail around me, yet I have not been touched even in my clothes. I can only say of the engagement that our movements were continually advancing, generally in a run. Once the right wing halted for a moment of the left, but only for a short time. Our situation at present is an enviable one compared to our past. Plenty of apples, cider, butter, etc. in abundance. The inhabitants are numerous and very friendly. Several took arms and fought valiantly at our sides." Captain John McCullough of the 5th Kentucky. Alright, I kind of like this one too. This is Battles of the River Raisin. John Richardson, gentleman volunteer of the 41st Regiment of Foot, described the second battle of the River Raisin from the point of view of the victorious British. On the 22nd, before daybreak, we came within sight of the enemy. Such was their security and negligence that our line was actually half formed within musket shot of their defenses before they were aware even of our presence. When we came to the firing part of the business, I could not get my gun off. It flashed in the pan, and I procured a wire and worked away at it with. I tried it again and again. It flashed. I never was so vexed that I think I was exposed to the torrent of fire from the enemy without having the power to return a single shot, though if I had fired 50 rounds, not one of them would have had any effect except upon the pickets. And that's from John Richardson of the British military. Wow, cool. Both sides. I like that. Artillery, January 22nd, 1813. The British artillery on January 22nd consisted of 6 small cannons, mostly 3-pounders, with some small howitzers. The artillery pieces were first positioned about 400 yards north of here, just south of the Mason Run Creek. These were used to good effect on the American regulars in the open ground on this site. They did not seriously affect the militia behind the fences. I don't know what that puncheon fences to the west. After the regulars retreated from this site, one British gun was moved to about this position and opened fire on the Kentucky militia to the west. Accurate Kentucky rifle fire at 200 yards soon wiped out the British gun crew, and the cannon was temporarily abandoned, then withdrawn outside effective range. And I think that's one of them. Don't know if that's an actual cannon that they would have had in 1812. I don't know if there's any kind of markings on it. See how they raised the site and raised it. The caps are gone. You look down in there and tell me if it's still loaded. How'd you like to have that staring you in the face? I think I see a bee's nest in there. Fire it. Maybe some really freaked out bees. Yeah, that's probably one of them. Oh, look at that. Very cool. Very cool indeed. Alright, we got some more information right here. The British light 3-pounder had a 2.9-inch bore and fired a 3-pound solid ball with a useful range of about half a mile. It could also fire a canister, which was considered of about 48 musket balls, which performed like a giant shotgun, but effective range was limited to 400 yards or less. British military in North America used a variety of winter sled arrangements. The exact types used here are not recorded. This 3-pounder is mounted on a type of winter sled devised in 1796. The inventor was the well-known British artillerist I'm gonna have to look that one up. Adai, who was stationed briefly in Detroit in the early 1790s and later tested this winter gun sled design in Quebec. And I guess that's it. I can see how that would work. I mean, you could see how moving that around would be relatively simple. That's pretty cool. What do we got here? Michigan State Society, National Society, United States Daughters of 1812 dedicates this bench commemorating the bicentennial of the Battle of the River Raisin in the War of 1812. Oh gosh, that would have been last year. Oh gosh, that was 200 years ago. Wow. I'm starting to feel old. U.S. 17th Infantry campsite. Elements of the U.S. 17th Infantry were camped in this open field just north of here when the British and Indians launched a surprise counterattack at dawn, January 22nd, 1813. The Americans held their ground here for 20 minutes before the Canadian militia, the British and Indians, flanked them, forcing a retreat. Reinforcements arrived from the Kentucky militia camp to the west, but the American forces soon found themselves fleeing across the frozen river toward the old road to Ohio. Nearly 400 Americans were eventually swept into this retreat. Later, the British moved their cannon to this site, hoping to surround the Kentucky militia camp, which was still fighting courageously. And that's this area, folks. This is a battlefield. This is an old battlefield. Kind of wonder if you went down in here what you would find, but it's a national park, so whatever's in there belongs to the men who dropped it. It should be left alone. Look at here. I'm sure that's probably for something. I don't know if they're trying to build a plank road or if they're just showing what one of the fences might have looked like for the forts. Very cool. I'll have to come back here during business hours and go check out the visitor center and see what they have to say about all this. Roundhead. In the temporary absence of Tecumseh, the Native American allies of the British were led by Wyandot Chief Roundhead and Walk in the Water. Besides the Wyandots, native forces included warriors from the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Ottawa, Chippewa, Delaware, Miami, Winnebago, Creek, Sioux, and Fox tribes. The American commander, General James Winchester, was captured by native warriors about a mile and a half south of this point, and Roundhead delivered him to the British commander, Colonel Henry Proctor. Believing continued resistance was useless, Winchester was induced to send a message to the remainder of his forces advising them to surrender. After the battle, in the words of Laurent Grocher, after the defeat of Winchester, many of the inhabitants fled with their families to the frontier of Ohio. Others went to Detroit, The British made several attempts to persuade the Indians to destroy what was left of the settlement at River Raisin, but the Potawatomis protested and declared they had given the land to the first settlers and had been compensated therefor, and would not suffer them to be disturbed in their habitations. On October of 1813, the inhabitants of Michigan Territory returned the favor by interceding on the behalf of those Native Americans who wished to negotiate an armistice with the American military authorities in Detroit, so they could return to their villages and live in peace with their neighbors.